Back when I saw The Dark Knight Rises, there was a scene that influenced my last years of training, and it was the scene of Tom Hardy as Bane with his just monstrous traps. You can also look at the scene from Warrior where he also has those monster traps, and ever since then I have been on the quest of building traps that are a little bit more like mountains that go up to my neck. Here are 4 exercises that I constantly use to build bigger traps and why I think everybody should use them at least sometimes in their workout programs. The first exercise is arguably the most common, and that is the dumbbell shrug. However, as opposed to performing your traditional dumbbell shrug where you're super vertical, I want you to take a slightly more forward-leaning position. What's going to happen when you do this is you're going to allow the traps to get a little bit more range of motion and put a little bit more stimulus on them. A lot of times I'll give these to lifters when they can't feel their traps when they are training. And now with this variation, something to think about is when you are allowing those dumbbells to do their thing, keep your arms long and almost let those arms kind of come in front of the legs. And then when you shrug up, those are gonna naturally go to the sides of the body. You're gonna wanna play with this a little bit, and I would highly suggest actually videoing yourself to watch how your traps are sequencing, because if you change your hand position a little bit in your dumbbells, depending on your anatomy, you can sometimes get a little bit more out of this exercise. Now, in the context of programming this exercise, I will generally perform them once or twice a week at the end of my workouts. I will often perform them for higher volume at higher efforts. So for example, doing 2 to 3 sets to an AMRAP with a weight that is like a 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10 challenging on my first 5 reps. So for example, I could shrug 60 pounds with relative ease. However, when I'm taking it to an AMRAP, it's an awesome stimulus for giving me a nice high effort without necessarily killing myself at the end of my workout. So that's one exercise I would highly suggest adding more into your program, the dumbbell shrug with a forward lean, and performing them for 2 to 3 sets with like a more AMRAP style fashion, and using a load that's about like a 6 or 7 out of 10 in the context of being challenging for like 5 to 6 reps, because once you start hitting rep 15, 20, etc., that's gonna turn into a 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 real fast. The second exercise is the Kelso Shrug. So with the Kelso Shrug, I started doing these back in the late 2000, like 17, 18. So that was one of the exercises that I saw on T-Nation, started programming, and it's been one of those exercises that I'll continually like come back to like almost bi-quarterly. And so with the Kelso Shrug, you're gonna need 2 things, a Smith machine and an incline bench. You can also perform these with dumbbells, but generally speaking, I like the Smith machine because that Smith machine is going to keep your resistance on a more fixed path. And now when setting up for the Kelso Shrug, bring your bench to about 45 degrees of an incline, and then bring your wheels of your incline bench under that Smith machine bar. That will generally be a good starting point for most folks. Ideally, when you're shrugging up, you want to be able to come a little bit more vertical based off of where your body is positioned on the bench. So you might need to play a little bit. And then when it comes to gripping that Smith machine bar, generally going a little bit wider than shoulder width will be your best bet. Eugene Teo just posted about how he was doing them snatch grip. I actually like having my hands in a little bit narrower, but again, play with your positioning and see how you respond best to this exercise. It is normal to tweak and play with your setup, with your hand position and little things like that, because you might find that, for example, having that Smith machine a little bit further from the wheels and then having your grip narrower actually feels better for you. So please don't be afraid to play with this. So now with the Kelso Shrug, I'll typically perform them once or twice a week at the end of a workout, and I'll try to program them when I'm doing something with an incline bench prior, so I don't have to do too much setup with this exercise, because if it's at the end, I'm trying to get done with my workout and be efficient with my time. And so when I am programming and performing this exercise, I'll usually do 3 to 4 sets of them, and I will usually perform higher effort, higher volume sets as well. With these, if you're doing them on the Smith machine, you can typically get a little bit heavier, and what I would suggest doing is like for 6 reps, pick a weight that's about like 7 or 8 out of 10 effort, and then go to an AMRAP or set like a 12 or 15 rep goal. And if you want a little bit more stimulus, I would actually suggest adding a 1 second hold at the top and then a nice slow eccentric. So when you're coming down with that Smith machine or the dumbbells, you can allow that upper back to kind of form around the bench before you shrug back up to really blast the traps. And now I love the Kelso Shrug because it can be awesome, I think, for training the mid trap and upper trap. And you could also get a little bit of a lower trap stimulus depending on how you set up for this exercise. So it's a really good exercise for just hitting all the parts of the traps as a whole. Hey guys, just a quick note, if you're looking for some programming direction, try out TF2 Strength. I have been a strength coach now for over 10 years. I have 11 programs on there. I am constantly building more, and you get a 7-day free trial, and then after it, it's $9.99 USD a month. Honestly, it's a pretty killer deal. You can feel it out, and there's no monthly commitment. But all that said, back to the video. The third exercise is the single arm dumbbell high pull. So I love this exercise because it's not only challenging for the trap, but also the delt. And if you're like me and you do a lot of CrossFit and cross-training workouts and you're doing dumbbell snatches, this can be a great exercise to give your shoulder a little bit of an additional love for carryover for that exercise and giving your trap a slightly better stimulus for carryover to that exercise as well. And now with the single arm dumbbell high pull, the way I like to program this exercise is programming them once a week, and I'll generally perform them on upper body days, especially pressing days. Generally, I will try to pair them on vertical pressing days, so days that I'm doing either barbell or dumbbell overhead press or shoulder press for that matter, I will put these either right behind them or towards the end of my workout. And now with this exercise, I'll generally do 2 to 3 sets for about like 10 to 15 reps depending on, and I'll try to keep that intensity around like 7 to 8 out of 10 intensity. I generally don't like to take these super heavy. This is an exercise that I think you can get a ton of feel with, and because with this exercise, you want to focus on really getting a nice vertical pull. I think when you get too heavy, you'll start to pull back more and start putting more momentum into them. So something to think about there with the programming of the intensity of this exercise. Feel them out, take them slow, and when you're performing them, something to think about as well is let that dumbbell come in front of the body and then pull straight up. If you're too to the side with this exercise, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable and almost kind of lock you up. So food for thought there when programming them. Don't be afraid to play with your hand position. The fourth exercise is the good old face pull. And I love the face pull because it's gonna really focus on that mid trap. And so if you are going to be performing the face pull, 2 things to keep in mind is number 1, when you are pulling that rope apart, think about having that line of resistance pretty parallel to the ground. You basically don't want to be pulling with that line of resistance either down or upward. It can kind of throw off your mechanics as a whole. And then also number 2, when you are performing them, don't be afraid to let those arms come out a little bit and really protract. And then when you come to retract, think about pulling those scaps together and keeping that line of pull nice and high, and you'll also get a little upper trap in doing so. When programming the face pull, I will generally perform them either after a deadlift day at the very end or after a pressing day. That is when I find that these feel the best for my overall needs, and when I perform them, I will generally do 2 to 3 sets for higher reps. So if I'm not taking them to AMRAP, I'll perform like 20 to 25 reps and just really focus on going through a nice smooth tempo with them and focusing on my range of motion and the line of resistance to get a nice pump for my traps to wrap up my workout. When programming face pulls, like every exercise in this video, don't be afraid to play with different positions to see what feels the best for your traps needs. All that said, y'all, those are the 4 exercises that I love programming for traps. Do I also suggest doing heavy farmer's carries, deadlifts, clean pulls, etc. for traps? Absolutely. This video is not to say don't do those if you want to build your traps, but these are 4 more isolated focus exercises for traps that I will program. If you have additional questions on this video and the exercises talked about, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And if you have a trap exercise that I didn't feature that you absolutely love for building those traps, drop it down below and let me know what you like to perform.